I'm now happy to introduce our next panel, Achieving Global Adoption of Impact Accounting, which will be moderated by Sebastian Welisiejko, Chief Policy Officer at GSG Impact. He'll be joined by panelists Ibukun Awosika, former chair of the First Bank of Nigeria, vice chair of GSG Impact, and a member of the Impact Task Force, Allison Herren, senior research fellow at NYU Law and former commissioner to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, Ken Shibusawa, CEO of Shibusawa and Company, and Vincent Siegerink, economist at the WISE Center of the OECD. Over to you.
It was an amazing picture of many friends, so many partners, heroes that were here. If my very dear friend and personal hero, Tracy Palangian, decided to be a TV host, she would be greater than Oprah and Ellen combined. So trying to moderate something after she did it so eloquently is very unfair, but I will try my best, Tracy. Let's take a seat. George, we will be there receiving calls from Ronnie. When he calls you on FaceTime video, it's a serious one, right? We've been there, I know, we will be there. It's such an honor. I'm so grateful to be here. Thanks for the invitation and to be with this distinguished panel. The GSG, whom I represent today, together with the ITF that Nick heard chair back in the day and continues to chair, we made a strong call in 2021 to the UK G7 for impact accounting as an urgent destination, because we think this is the key to change the DNA of capitalism, no less than that. We've been making decisions in the blind for many, many years, and that has to come to an end, not only as investors, but also as consumers, also as decision makers in the public sector. To me, this is a historic day. I'm an economist from South America, and I need this. We all need this. Not only investors, not only businesses, citizens need this. And we need to democratize this, and we need to make it globally relevant. And even before that, when I was Vice Minister of Social Development in my country, in Argentina, we were presiding the G20, and I was co-leading something called the Development Working Group. And I got an email from Ronnie sending me language to infiltrate the messages of the G20. This was 2017. And the paragraph read an urgent call to the G20 countries to embrace impact-weighted accounting. What did I do? I followed an order, so I went to the G20 meeting with all the delegates from all the countries, and we floated that language around. Imagine around the table, Turkey, the US, Russia. I said, go away, red line. They say red line, but they don't. Red line, red line, red line. What is this? It's too complicated. This will never happen. And here we are today. This is a reality. So I insist, it's a historic day. I feel super honored and excited, and we'll come back to that. But I think today we want to test, validate, or reinforce the notion that impact accounting has global applicability. It needs to have global applicability. But I think Gwen said this is not yet mainstream. It will be mainstream, but we need to do a bit of work for it to be mainstream. So the overarching question to all of you, really, and let's try to build on that fluently, is how do we go to mainstream globally? And how do we make it for every country, for every stakeholder, in every geography? And Ibukun, like myself, you work and operate out of what some here would call the global south. We live south of the equator, and we deal with very different entities, perhaps, to the ones that were portrayed here. What, according to review, and you are a board member of the IFVI, you're vice chair of the GSG, and you're also from the First Bank of Nigeria. What is the challenge? What are the opportunities in an economy like Nigeria to embrace impact accounting?
Thank you very much, Seb. Good afternoon, everyone. I guess it was fascinating to listen to the first panel talk about all the values created and the processes followed. And if you come from the global south, like I do, then you realize that for us it's even a more desperate situation. We definitely need it to work, because we're the part of the world where data is not readily available. Half the time you're not sure where the investment through our governments or other agencies, if it's really gone towards what you've invested it in for. You really can't account for your investments. And the need to be able to generate the right information that gives you the comfort and incentivizes the right people to be able to move impact capital towards the part of the world where there's the greatest need for impact capital to come in becomes for us an existential issue. Because we have the people who have the need. We have the governments that are not at their best. And we have systems that do not readily account for our need. And we've got a massive gap between what our governments can afford and what we need for our people. So if anybody needs this to work, it's the Global South. And so finding the right systems to be able to deploy the effective recording or accounting for the investment into our region in a way that it encourages others to want to put their capital in a very competitive world for capital towards our part of the world becomes most essential.
And Ibukun, something that we discussed in Lagos when I had the honor of visiting and working with the GSG and the Nigerian chapter of the GSG there, is when we talk about adoption of the things, and when Dan so eloquently showed the impact statement and talked about scope 3, across the value chain of what we would call a reporting entity in countries like ours, it's predominantly made of small companies. Not only small companies, in the value chains of the reporting entities, there are informal companies because more than half of the economy operates informally. So what is the challenge, what is the opportunity, and how do you imagine that unrolling?
Okay, let's take my country. I'm Nigerian. Let's take my country as an example. 45% of the economy of my country is informal. The largest part of the economic system is driven by MSMEs and SMEs, and I mean, we have the major corporates, you have global companies, you have national corporates, and all of that. Except we create a system that allows us to trap the information across the value chain, it becomes an almost impossible task. However, it's not that impossible if we also create like a funnel. You walk through let's take my days as the chairman of First Bank and think about the impact of a systemically important institution like the bank. And we think about the kinds of organizations that have to deal with the institution and the many that are tied to their financial system as well. There is a need to invest in knowledge development because that's key. There's a lack of understanding of what we're even talking about at different levels. There's a need to build the adequate manpower that will support the system. And there's a need to have what you call champions, major corporates or medium, small size companies at different levels that will represent the examples that are then used to encourage others. And there has to be some sort of reward system that is built into the model. And whatever model is created as a base has to then be reworked for the local context in order to ensure that we're able to adequately drag in as many people within the economic system into that whole process so that we can have the right kind of information and incentivize the right kind of companies to be part of it.
Absolutely. I think the commitment, the interest, the engagement from the key stakeholders is there, as we've seen in Lagos and Abuja with full rooms. And not only that, I would add that also raising voices from those jurisdictions in the design of the methodologies is very important. And the team here at IFVI through the VTPC and the board, which is so diverse, I can give testament that they pay so much attention to that. So thank you for the opportunity. I think we need to keep working for those voices to be more reflected behind the coefficients. So thank you, Ibukun. Allison, let's go to you, and I will ask this question as a foreigner with respect and try not to put you in a different place, but we all want to hear from you. We've read about ESG and impact being at least controversial in a jurisdiction like the US, such an important role in the global economy. And now we have this breakthrough of impact accounting, which is a reality. How do you think a development like the one that the IFVI is leading and the years to come, what's the role of impact accounting in that controversy, let's say, here in the US?
There is, of course, as you note, a fair amount of polarization on the issue of ESG and how it fits into the economy, or how it ought to fit into the economy, what factors are relevant and what factors are not. What I think is particularly impactful when it, not to use a pun, but what is particularly significant when it comes to impact accounting is I think it cuts through a lot of that noise, because it puts dollar and cents figures on this. You hear these referred to all the time as non-financial metrics. We all know that's not true. Yeah. But how do we go about sort of proving that? How do we go about demonstrating that? You can say, well, we all know that X tons of greenhouse gas emissions into the air, we know that causes damage, but when you put it in dollars and cents, in the way that I have watched this organization work tirelessly for years and do, it's really impressive. I've dug through the data myself to try to understand it. I can understand it. I'm a financial regulator, but I can understand it. So I believe that translating all of this data that people want to say, or not, the detractors want to say is irrelevant, is part of some secret agenda, whatever it is they want to say. When you can say, let me tell you what the actual financial impact is, and you can use that data to achieve the kinds of comparisons that we've been hearing about, that goes a long way, I think, to answering that argument. And I do think also, to Ibukun's point, by definition, if we do achieve some accurate impact accounting, which we're well on the way to doing, it is a historic moment today, and I've been very excited telling everyone I know you should come to hear about this. But if we do that, one thinks that it's set up in order to ensure that folks who are investing and want to make an impact will make that impact where it matters most. Yes. In places like Nigeria and others. So not only is it sensible, is it comparable, is it data-driven, but it also is by definition set up to achieve what we need to achieve globally and not just locally.
So important, right? I mean, I think very years ago, like Ronnie was saying, what does it mean? It means a lot. Tons of carbon, jobs created, gender pay gap, or liters of water. But the moment you can condense all of that into a monetary figure that we can all relate to, that becomes something very powerful. I like what you say, that it can cut across all of that noise. And you being part of the IFVI family, you know how the science is being developed. I want to emphasize how open and transparent and inclusive, there are no secrets. Anyone like you, anyone who wants to go through the coefficients, the metrics, can do so. And Dan was emphasizing how important that this is, by definition, from birth, a public good, conceived as a public good. Do you think that feature will be important also to cut through the noise?
1,000% yes. When you think about one of the biggest criticisms, you always hear these stories where they'll say, all right, here's this company that is in this ESG index, but look at its performance on X, Y, and Z. It's in there for this reason, but for all of these other reasons, it's a terrible actor, and so it's used to sort of attack the entire construct of trying to invest in a socially conscious way. But if impact accounting levels all of that out, right? So that if you are looking at the performance of a firm, you're not just looking at their greenhouse gas emissions. You're looking at adequate wages. You're looking at all of the things that matter from a sustainability standpoint. You're looking at the social, the environmental, and then you're understanding there's three pillars. You think social, environmental, and economic. Those are the three kind of pillars of sustainability. And what impact accounting does is level that playing field and give you a number that takes into account all of it, instead of just raising the profile of one, burying it somewhere in an index where people can later pull that out and say, actually, this is very unsustainable and here's why. So it just brings rationality to that analysis.
No black boxes as a way to demystify and cut through the noise. That's very, very powerful. Ken, let's go to you. You're not only an industry leader in Japan, you're also part of the IFVI family, and we are very excited to have you also as the chair of the Japanese chapter of the GSG. So thank you for all your contributions. Now, in Japan, there have been early adopters of impact accounting as per the IFVI methodology. I understand with great success. We read about those case studies. What would you say, like Ibukun, from a very different jurisdiction, in a very different part of the world, how this will be received, how this is being received in Japan and the way their wider Asian region?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the honor to share the stage with a distinguished panel. The concept of impact-weighted accounting, Ronnie introduced to me in 2020. Well, he first used the word post-ESG, which kind of struck my sort of curiosity, and later he introduced this concept of impact-weighted accounting. And to me, it was I'm a long-term investor, and looking at it from a long-term investing standpoint, the value of the company, the financial value of the company is like the tip of the iceberg, because you put a number on it, you can see it. But for most of the value, it's below the surface. You can't see it, but for future value creation, that's where the value is. And so when this concept of impact-weighted accounting just kind of fell on my lap, I thought, wow, this is a really interesting way, to look at that sort of the unforeseen value of the company. I introduced this to a friend of mine, a long-term investing company called Eisai. His name is Mr. Yanagi. He had his own valuation model, but he got really excited about this. And he's a very vibrant kind of a personality, and so he was kind of spreading the word all over the place. And once you know it, it's like everybody large companies got very, very interested in this concept of impact-weighted accounting. The reason I believe it resonated so much with Japanese large companies and financial institutions is the fact twofold. One is that Japanese corporations in the last several decades have been pressured for poor financial performances. But every time this is, but we care for our employees, we care for our customers, and so they could never put a number on it. Mm-hmm. But this is it's still experimental, I guess, in a sense. But it's a way to put a number and say, hey, we know that value is not just a two-dimensional thing that you put on a piece of paper, but it's multi-dimensional. And so I think that raised the curiosity for many Japanese companies. A second reason, if I might add, is the name Eiichi Shibusawa probably means nothing to most of you here. But for Japanese audiences, it does, because it's the face of the new 10,000 yen bill. And it's my grandfather's grandfather, and is known as the father of Japanese capitalism. And the reason why he's on the 10,000 bill is not because he's established 500 companies, 600 social enterprises, but I believe because he had this vision for the new, Ronnie talked about 1933. This is back in 1873, so way back. But he had this vision that that businesses should be integrated with morality. Mm-hmm. And what is morality? It's not just about doing good, not doing bad, following the compliance manual. But I think it's basically there's a lot of issues globally in your community, and it's solving those issues. And what is that in present-day language? It's impact. And so this impact and this financial profits has always been sort of ingrained, I think, from 150 years ago in Japan, in a sense. And so it's kind of re-emerged in a different context, but a very modern, but very real, I think, for many Japanese corporations, which for many of them, 150 years ago, they were a startup.
Exactly. And
they existed to solve social, gaps in the society.
And that ancient relative, it's the grandfather.
Great-great-grandfather's grandfather.
Who was the father of Japanese capitalism, would be very proud of the great-great-great-grandson that's now working. Working to hack capitalism for the better and change the DNA of that mere idea. So. Thank you, Ken, and we look forward to continue working with you and the community in Japan. Now, Vincent, we share many spaces, and we're in a very interesting meeting today in the impact management platform. both Rob and Dan made great work in clarifying that this does not come to clash with any of the disclosure standards out there, but to complement that, to add a very valuable extra layer of information. There is a bit of concern in our camp, and more widely, that there are too many frameworks. How do we harmonize? How do we make them interoperable? I sometimes very irresponsibly, I paraphrase IFVI very irresponsibly. So if I paraphrase irresponsibly, guys, you tell me. But sometimes I would say this is a plug-in, an add-on, something that will enhance that information we are preparing. And as you know, in our community, there is concerns about this harmonization. OECD does a whole lot of work to ensure harmonization. As a trusted convener of this discussion, how do you think impact accounting will help us, hopefully, in that harmonization and interoperability path?
Thanks, Seb. So I sit at the part of the OECD that is the home of what we call the Beyond GDP movement that arose after the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009. And this is really a sort of sister movement. And over the past 15 years, we've worked with governments, with national statistical offices in embedding a sort of multi-dimensional understanding of progress in policy-making processes. And it's actually interesting to think about the mainstreaming of impact accounting. IFVI is very aware of the sort of technology adoption S-curve and how you need to sort of get some early pioneers on board, identify some critical actors in order to sort of reach a moment of acceleration and momentum. We are seeing that now. Recently, we have seen countries really embedding a well-being perspective in concrete policy-making processes, including budgeting processes. We are seeing developments in the accounting space as well. So all that to say that, in terms of the idea of mainstreaming impact accounting, I think there's a lot to learn from that experience. A few years ago, I had the pleasure of meeting the finance minister of New Zealand. They're one of the first countries to sort of do this embedding of well-being in budgeting processes. And he did say, we are now at the first mile of a marathon, right? And I'm not saying this to be disparaging. The impact accounting movement has come such a long way, but we also need to be realistic, right? And to acknowledge that there's still ways to go. In terms of placing impact accounting in that system of impact management resources and approaches, so we convene this impact management platform that's a sort of convener of standard setters on different aspects of the process of managing impact. Managing impact involves due diligence. It involves reporting. I think we have GRI in the room, and impact accounting has a crucial place in that process and in that system. And I think what we want to do in the context of that platform is to make sure that those approaches and those resources talk to each other in an effective way, and for companies and investors to understand how they relate to each other, so that they see that this is a well-functioning sort of system of different approaches that need to happen in order to move us forward.
And thinking a bit more ahead, having been in government in and out many times, I can say that the OECD is really heard. Many countries want to be part of the OECD, and those who are part of the OECD pay attention to the OECD and you follow. So in the coming years, we know that we'll count on you as a fellow revolutionary to help us spread the word in the OECD. In that journey, many of your members will tell you, this is too complex, it can't be done, we need to wait, this is for tomorrow, and you will find a lot of backlash. What will you tell them?
So, I think part of the answer goes to the need for these pioneers, right? So for companies like New Zealand, like Scotland, like a number of different countries that have started to embed, in the case of well-being in policy processes, these types of approaches. When it comes to impact accounting, I think one thing that we shouldn't forget, and it's come up in conversation today, is the need to make that case for the materiality of impact and the case for why managing impact is necessary. And we like to think about that from sort of three different angles. So first, business has a responsibility to manage impact under the OECD M&E guidelines and the UN guiding principles. Second, managing impacts is necessary from a sort of what we call idiosyncratic risk management perspective, right? So reputational risks, legal risks, et cetera. But the third bucket is this sort of idea that impacts also constitute a contribution to system level risks, right? Negative impacts and positive impacts contribute to the undermining or strengthening of our social and environmental systems. Specifically, one of the things that we're concerned about is making the argument that social issues and inequalities are also a system level risk. I think on climate change, that is now increasingly understood. We can't tackle climate change without also tackling inequalities and really articulating and strengthening the evidence base on inequality as an undermining of our social and economic systems continues to be necessary to make that case.
And also showing the opportunity, as our colleague said, now it's value to be maximized. It's not only risk to be minimized. So yeah, building the evidence case. We're approaching the end, and I would like to ask a question not only to the panelists but to all of you. So who in this room would recognize himself, herself as an investor or a capital supplier? Raise your hand. Okay, many of you. A company, a corporation, an entrepreneur? Related to government activities? Nick, you're raising your hand too much. Everything. It's confusing, but I know it's true. It's true and confusing. It's true and confusing. Market builder, academia, advisory. Random citizen that walked through the Harvard club said, impact something, I'm in. Who lives and works in this country, in the US? Who made the long trip to come here? Well, no matter if you came from around the corner, if you came from Nigeria, from Argentina, from Tel Aviv, from wherever you came, and no matter which sector of the industry you represent, this is coming. This is relevant to all of us. So the question to all of you, is, this is today. It's Wednesday, 25th of 2024. We are on Wednesday, 25th of 2027, 3 years down the line. What does the world look like in 3 years' time? We are here. We come back to the Harvard Club to have this conversation. What happened? So I would say everyone, it will look silly, it will feel silly, but I think it's important. If you allow yourself to close your eyes for like 10 seconds and think, what is the world like in 3 years' time? And then we'll come to all of you. Ibukun, where are we in 2027?
Okay.
We look younger, we look wonderful. We haven't aged.
We haven't,
No.
not at all. My gray is now black, so that seems better. But on a serious note, for us, I think it's a win-win all the way for our side of the world. First, there's an opportunity to actually create jobs by raising the next generation of human capital that will be required to drive the impact accounting and transparency records. Because we don't have the skills, we're going to have to train a lot of new people. Two, we're very good at catching up. That's the one thing most people don't realize about our side of the world. We tend to jump many stages as things move because we have a lot of young people. 70% of our population is under 40. They're young, creative minds, and they're creating new solutions that multiply the baseline of the standards that you have created, multiply its application within our system. Why? Because they can see the value for us. And once we smell the value that we need, one thing we're good at as a people is how to work despite our governments. And that requires innovation and creativity. And usually it's our young people driving it. So we're in a world where the value of this has been recognized, and our people are innovating how to be part of it despite our limitations. And our regulators are totally being recouped to be able to support. Remember all the sessions we had in Nigeria. So we always seem like we're starting late, but somehow we manage to catch up and move forward. So it's why we never lose hope. It's how we can be happy despite our many challenges.
Yeah, to that. Vincent, maybe you work for the OECD.
I have to
hopefully.
follow that. Really, what I was going to say is much more pragmatic, and that is Dan and his team, have put out a wonderful set of standards of resources on climate and environmental issues today. And I keep thinking about that people and planet link and the fact that the two are so related. And so I hope that in 3 years we'll have, a set of methodologies that's just as wonderful and strong on social issues, and that they really move the needle on the way that we think about inequalities and social issues.
And many pioneers.
Sorry?
And many pioneers, users around
Also.
the world. Ken?
In 2027, I think we'll have the countdown to the SDGs, and people will be talking about what's post-SDGs. And so there'll be a lot of discussion about that. And I believe that should be about, solving, and there'll be, in 3 years, there'll be conflict in the world. There'll be corruption. There'll be climate problems. And capitalism will be a bad word in 3 years' time. But the other C, I think it's very important, is I think the challenge that was talked about, the clarity on impact, and co-creation, and using capitalism, hopefully, for a better future rather than a bad one.
Thank you. Allison, we have no idea who will govern this great nation in 3 years' time, but we are here, united, because life will continue. What is the world looking like?
Well, here's what I will say, and it comes from listening to my fellow panelists, but it also comes from the vision that I see as a result of George and Ronnie's work and Rob and this organization, and that is we're on a path toward uptake on this. So it's early days, we're far away at this point from regulatory uptake, but that was what was needed. That was the needed precedent to get where we are now in the US. There was no way at the SEC we could have passed the climate rule or any of our rules that are related in any way to sustainability without the organic demand and the organic growth in the markets that we are now seeing the beginning of with impact accounting. So my belief is in 3 years, we're going to see a sea change just like we did with sustainability, like the work of SASB that Janine worked so hard on, that we are going to see it move to a space where there is an opportunity for regulators to step in and make some sense of the organic growth of a movement.
Excellent. It's 2017, and we are in Chicago. We were in Chicago. Tracy was there. Franz Siegel was there, maybe Fran is here, many of you were there, and Ronnie gave a speech, maybe he remembers, and he gave a speech, and in his speech he said that the Nobel Prize in economics was awaiting whoever cracked the marriage between risk and return and impact. In 3 years' time, who knows, maybe the Academy wakes up and awards something big to this fantastic team, and we have Nobel Prize winners in this fantastic team. In 2017, that seemed really crazy, but who knows? We're not far away from that. I see a world where we make consumption decisions, investment decisions, government decisions through a completely different lens, thanks to these methodologies, and you will agree it's a very exciting time to be alive. It's a very exciting time to be part of this journey. Thank you, IFVI, for allowing all of us to be part of that. Sometimes I speak about IFVI as we, because again, very irresponsibly, together with all of us, we have to do it. You have to keep going with the purpose-driven, with your hearts, with your pristine methodologies, technique, construction to work. So we all here wish you all the best, because if you get it right, we get it right, and the world changes for good. So congratulations, all of the team, Ronnie, George, Rob, Dan, Katie, Andrea, Bilan, Rebecca, for getting us together today. So thank you all, thank you for allowing us to share this moment. Thank you to the panelists.